Hello ladies and gentlemen, Dave Dobbs here. It's the 5th of March 2021. What an exciting time we're in. We're coming into the next big flyby, and I've got you here on 3 objects flying together. This was posted by third phase of the moon on the 2nd of February. Just gone 2021. Notice you can really see the twin tails of these objects. If I go back to this shot, posted by Brandon Corey Nagley. When was it? It was, he even calls them Dobbs object. That was on the 25th of December. I don't think that was in my last video. Perhaps it was, but I don't think it was in my last videos. But notice we see the pair of them. And then third phase of the moon captures 3 of them, which we see here. I mean, he just, I'll just let you just see the drift of that. Sorry, just let you see the drift of that for a shake. I'm not going to play the whole video or anything else. I just want to show you some various shots of how those move. There, look at that. It's shots of them all around the globe. 3 twin tails. Now, why are they really small? When we saw the pair in what was the exact date of the pair? The 25th of December on Christmas Day. And on the 15th of December, we saw that. Now that's obviously not one of those pairs. That was a shot posted around about the 12th of December 2020, just gone by Brandon Corey Nagley as well. Again, well done Brandon for getting all these shots up and that sort of stuff. We've all got our different opinions of what this represents, but the real orbital mechanics of its movements, shots of it from all around the globe, and your constant research is just absolutely amazing. You get it together, and I build these models, and that's exactly where I've been for the last 2 months building this new model, and it's been the most unbelievably difficult thing to get my head around, and I've had to do so many different things. And if I was just to show you what we're actually really looking at, I've got Pluto there that's got about 350-year orbit around planet X, and our sun that's got about a 300-year orbit around planet X. And whether you want to call it Jupiter orbiting Pluto, whether you want to call it Pluto orbiting Jupiter, whether you want to call it Neptune, whether you want to call it Uranus, whether you want to call it Aries, whether you want to call it Tiamat, you have to kind of get to the point where, if we're going to really build this model, and now we've got so much data, especially with what's just come in over the last 3 months. But I'm going to present to you this timeline from another perspective, a completely new perspective. I'm going to try and go through the most relevant bits, the key points. But for those of you who know what my videos are like, they're very in depth and they're very long, and they cover an enormous amount of depth. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to start at the key points of the changes, the fundamental key points. I'm going to really try and blow you away today. I'm going to really try and absolutely blow your minds. And I'm going to try, because many of you have watched my videos for a long time and have gone on this massive journey of trying to understand this GFP shot. You know, I've repeatedly looked at this shot and tried to quantify how Jupiter could have been in the night sky on the 14th of October 2016, how it could have been so massive at that time, how it could have put a massive plasma charge into the side of Mars. You know, all the kind of Wall Thornhill kind of like electric universe kind of Thunderbolt project-esque kind of like people would, you know, they will never comment on this. They will never comment on this because it smacks in the face of the whole theory. What they talk about occurred right in front of their eyes on a webcam. You know, it was 10 o'clock at night facing northeast, looking directly up at where Mars was, and then boosh, Jupiter plasma shots into the side of it, a thunderbolt into the side of Mars. So get this, so if we look at that and we say, could that be how this goes? Just let me go back to that, and you can see as Jupiter came in here, and it caused that, they didn't collide, but they came very close, enough to cause a jolt. I haven't put any of the other overlays here. Well, obviously I have put a lot of overlays, but you know, this is going to get really, really complicated. You understand that if we carry on going, and we go past that point where that occurred, and then we're going to come to this point over here, say, that's going to be 2022, where it's getting furthest away from us, where it's going to the place that we truly understand it is. But if we were to go back, I'm sorry, if I was to go then further forward, I've gone too far forward then. If I was to come over to here, to 2018, May 2018, we saw Jupiter massive. We saw Jupiter massive shots of Jupiter. Let me see if I can find some of those shots. I think it will come up. Yeah, these were the sort of shots that we were seeing in May 2018, and everyone was marveling on how come we saw Jupiter so massive. Well, what you also got to understand is that 2023, basically January the 20th, around about that time, January the 20th, 2023, is the official perihelion point of Jupiter to supposedly our Sun. That's the official point. Which means that 2017 was when it was at the kind of perihelion sort of point, the furthest point from our Sun, the furthest point away from us. And yet we get a series of cycles where we can clearly see Jupiter massive, but we can't explain it. And we're getting all of these flybys that we can't explain. Well, I made errors I've made errors all the way through this, and it's the errors that have pushed me forward with this model. And to begin to understand how this has worked, we first of all have got to go forward to ...2004. We've got to go to 2004, or back rather, 2004, to the 26th of not January, it was Boxing Day, it was the 26th of December 2004, the big Boxing Day tsunami. So let's do that on this model here. What we're going to do is we're going to go forward. This part of it is a little bit complicated, so let me just simplify this down and go to some of these flybys that without all the layers together, because I want all the layers together later so we can see the patterns of when they come together and when they don't come together. So I can show you the 3 flying in unison that we just saw on third phase of the moon. But before I get there, I want to show you how we've got there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start this model here, and it looks so confusing, and it really is confusing. So we're going to move it forward really slowly, and as we move it forward, we're just going to bring all the bits into we're just going to explain it as we go along, and I think that's probably the best way, because I want to show you what caused the 2004 tsunami and earthquake on Boxing Day. But I also want to show you that the same object caused the Sichuan earthquake in 2008, around about the 12th of May 2008. An absolutely massive earthquake that I'm of a mind could be absolutely calculated, just like the Fukushima, just like Chernobyl disasters. We could have calculated those, and I'm of a mind that people knew, they had to have known these things were coming in. If I can plot these and we can see all these enormous patterns going on within the cycles, then why shouldn't we be able to understand that 2008, they would have absolutely known there was a massive earthquake about to occur in 2008 in Sichuan province in China, because of the way the movements of this. So let's start this here. What have we got in the picture at the moment? So here in the center, we've got the sun, and then we've got Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars, as we would normally expect, orbiting the sun here. And Jupiter we've got going like I showed you in previously, we've got Jupiter going around what we're calling Pluto over here, and it's coming in past us, and it's bringing these bodies that are spinning around it. And as we've got closer and closer, some of these bodies actually come between the sun and it, and some of these bodies that are orbiting Jupiter, when it gets so close to our sun, they swing right round our sun and come back to, and then to come back round to Jupiter again. Now it could also be that they actually orbit Jupiter and Pluto, and they have a much more extended orbit. That is possibly the greater truth in this. And so these are overlaid to show you the timings that we've seen and the earthquakes that occur as we go along. And there's lots of incredible patterns that you're going to see here. So what we're doing is we're bringing this one I'm calling Hydra. This is the new orbital object that I'm bringing into the model. It's the one that I've been desperately trying to calculate, the one I talked about in the last video, trying to ascertain the 4th orbit. And that's what this is about. And in understanding this 4th orbit, it's changed other orbits. It's changed the whole model very slightly, and it's brought us back to the exact same model that Galileo would have seen when he saw the 4 moons of Jupiter back in 1613. The same thing that kind of like Isaac Newton would have been observing in 1681. The same thing that that would have been observed, you know, right through every 84 years when we invent a new dwarf planet. And we're going to explore that for those who stay long enough later as we go through this video. It's not going to take that long. We're going to go through the 2,000-year cycles. But before we get there, we're going to go to the crux of why the 2008 financial crash had to happen, why the big boys had to pull their money out, why just before, do you remember when when just before the discovery of Pluto in 1930, a massive stock market crash, also the time of massive earthquakes and everything else like that, when this thing was first coming in, when Carlos Ferrada predicted in 1939 on the 20th of January that Planet X would pass and there would be a massive earthquake, and he was right on the money. He was 4 days out. Those same 4 days out, I've been so many times with my prediction, always these 4 days. And a big part of this will also come even into greater focus, because we can take this whole thing a massive step when we can understand the basis of the basic fundamental layer that I've just offered you there with Jupiter orbiting Pluto, or however you want to see this. You know, from a distance, you know, we had in the 70s, we had Robert Harrington, who discovered supposedly the furthest moon of Pluto, which he called Charon. So I've called the furthest, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But we're talking about this latest one. Charon is like as the pair, as Alex Lujan, who runs the Planet X channel, is a really old. He's been, you know, he's a veteran Planet X filmmaker, and he often calls them the twins. And Charon is one of the twins. It's the one that Isaac Newton would have seen in 1381, when he kept saying it was Halley's Comet, and then it reappeared again a month later. Come on, guys, we're seeing the same patterns going right throughout history. There's not that much of a big deal that's really going on here. We're just, you know, when Robert Harrington, like I say, he massively influenced Zecharia Sitchin and the 12th planet, and how he perceived this big 3,600 year orbit that is just impossible. It is like a 1,800 year big cycle. And I'm going to show you that big cycle when we go through it, a much more simplified version of it. But before we get to that, we're gonna root in to some of the kind of like the key aspects here. So we're going to come back to this Hydra, this new cycle, this new orbit that I'm piecing together now, and we're going to start at 2004. And let's just keep our focus on that for a moment, remembering it's coming past, it's causing the massive tsunami now. It's coming over the top of Earth. It's being drawn in towards the sun. That's its primary direction. That's its overall compass that led it from its orbit from Jupiter. Always remember this, and this is another aspect of all my orbits that has massively changed. I've always been of a mind the orbits have been on a fixed plane of these twin flybys coming in. I've always been of a mind they've been of a fixed orbit. It was so retarded, it was so short-minded, but it was the only way I could build this. These have always been aimed, when they've been coming in and going, they've been so close, the system has been so close to our sun, our inner solar system, that its planets have come round, its twin tail objects have come round. They have been drawn in like the needle of a compass towards our sun. And so they have changed as the whole system has dropped through, as the Pluto system has dropped through the ecliptic plane of the Planet X system that our sun is really orbiting. As it has dropped through, the objects orbiting around it have changed their ecliptic angle as they've then been close enough to go to the sun. They've changed their ecliptic angles as they've gone round, and that's a really important aspect. And so I'm coming in at a midway point without giving you the whole kind of view of seeing that possibly, but I just want to explain that. So we've got Hydra coming in. Whether you want to call it Hydra, it's one of the moons of Pluto. That's every time this comes around, we call it different names. We reinvent it. We come up with different stories to try and keep the idea that you live in a heliocentric model, which separates you from the truth of where you really are in the universe, your true place in the universe, the bigger picture of what's really going on around you. So Harrington was, he was a government. He worked within the government, and he kind of basically pieced together. He knew what Charon really was. Absolutely. They were going out. There was, Galileo, as in the telescope, was going out in the 80s to Jupiter. How do you think they got there? They know where all this is, and the information they feed back to us, that he let Zecharia Sitchin fall into the trap, because Zecharia Sitchin just simply couldn't believe, like all of these people. Carlos Ferrada, could he believe it? Possibly couldn't get published he called it Herculosis and everything else like that. And yet in these cycles, 1999 comes up, and I'm going to take you to that. Now, he would have only been able to predict his prediction that after the 20th of January 1939, his next prediction was 1999. He would have only been able to give you that absolutely specific date if he'd known it was Jupiter, because it runs in the exact date from the 20th of January 1939. You add your kind of like you add your exact orbit of Jupiter, and you keep repeating it. You get Chernobyl, you get Fukushima, you get 1999, you get all the big seismic events, the biggest storms. When the dams collapse, all the big dams collapses, and the biggest earthquakes, the biggest volcanoes, all fall in that sequence. So we're going to follow Hydra, and you're going to notice it's 2005 now. We're going straight into 2005. Notice that this is very loose, it's ballpark. But one thing I can tell you is Hydra is all of these planets that I'm going to show you, all of them. They're not just iffy-wiffy. I don't speed them up and I slow them down. Hydra, when the Earth goes round the Sun 12 times, Hydra will have gone round 13 times. That's the exact mathematics and the proportions of its movements I'm showing you here. So it's moving, if you like, 1/13 faster. Would that make it, or would that make it 1/12 faster? I'll be interested to know your opinion there. But anyway, that's this one's movement. It's moving 1 month faster. The pair that you're gonna see coming in are moving. Earth goes round the Sun 12 times. These come round 11 times. Exactly. That's how these cycles work. And then I'm going to bring in another one in a bit as well, and then with the fourth, and that works in exactly the same. But before we confuse matters, let's just try and stay with Hydra. It's going 13 times round when we're going 12, so it's 1/13 or 1/12. Would that make it, or 1/13? I can never really work that out, how you kind of present it, but when you say it like that, maybe it's a little bit easier. But to keep it precise, because this is about precision. In my mind, this is about the mathematical precision that we're offering. So understand that we're just bringing the proportions of these in together. So we're not trying to be too precise, but we're looking at their overall kind of general positions and seeing if we can understand the patterns. It's staying ahead of Earth at that point as we're coming round. Now it's coming back round here. We come back to, we're going to the 17th of January. And we come across, and we start getting closer now to meeting at the May point. You're going to come back around here. Keep your eyes just on Hydra here, just over here. Coming back round over here, and we start getting close to this point. Now I realise it crosses kind of at that point, but just try and keep your attention on that, on Hydra coming round there for a shake. It's coming back in here now. And as we came round here, this is what I'm of mind causes. Because the same thing, I'm of mind, is going to cross us again. We saw that same pattern happen in 2016, because this in 2016 it comes back to where it came back to where it started, which is why on the 22nd of November 2016, round about that time, we saw the massive earthquake in Christchurch, where we saw the whole plate come up. We saw another massive earthquake in Fukushima again, and we had the sightings. We had the whole thing. So that's where I'm going with that. And what that means is that if this object, as it's been going round, let's keep that going round. Let's just stay with Hydra for a shake. And well, we're just going to know that Hydra's going to come back in 2000, and we know that Hydra's going to come back in 2016, and it's going to sync up again. So let's just now think about the next big. We've done the kind of 2008, 2004. We can see how those, remember 2008 was so massive. This is what caused the financial crash. This was the fear that was behind the financial crash that makes everyone pull their money out of all the vulnerable places. And in my opinion, I might be wrong, but there must be a precursor that is the trigger of all these events, because we can see that just prior to the massive storms that came in that decimated China in 1930 and all the crazy stuff that went down, just prior to that was a massive financial crash. In the 80s, there was a massive financial crash, and we saw the same thing. We saw Chernobyl go bang. We saw all the same thing, and then suddenly we get the massive financial crash because there's a fear that something massive is coming in, that there's destruction coming. Okay, so when we come around to the pair, I realise there's other objects that we're gonna bring in here, because we're going to start into the cycles that enabled me to build my entire timeline. These 200-day anomalies that enabled me to predict every 200 days. For some reason, we had a flyby, and we had it from 2011 right up to 2017, 18, and then they just started becoming more frequent, and we started becoming saturated with them at every corner of the Earth. And we started becoming overwhelmed, but there were still patterns within these patterns, and it's these patterns that I'm trying to show you here. So let's bring this over now to 2010. We're watching these two objects coming potentially, let's think about this. At this point, 2010, we saw Jupiter plasma charge Mars in 2016. And then we saw it massive in 2018. This was the point. This was literally the point where the whole system, the Sun going around planet X, and Jupiter or Pluto, whatever you want to call the big system, the big thing that all these objects seem to orbit over here, them both coming around planet X, and one's cutting, the Pluto system is cutting through the ecliptic plane and plunging down. This is the crossing point. Remember that in 1930, Pluto was discovered, supposedly hiding in the Kuiper Belt, even though it was there, hidden in plain sight, in daylight. It was hiding in the daylight. It had disappeared. It had gone from the night sky into the day sky. Or it was going into the day sky, should I say. It was hiding in plain sight. So we saw it in 1930. Now, if you were to go onto Solar System Scope, maybe I'll do that as an overlay, and then go from the point it was discovered, you will notice it will cross back into the ecliptic on their official orbit in about 2018, 2017, 2018, exactly when this crosses, supposedly with its 5 planets, but one's supposedly, they say it's 5 planets, but you can get which one they're really talking about when they say there's a 5th. You can kind of guess. You can kind of guess which one they're talking about, maybe. And I'll put it like this, it has its own moon. Clue. But it cuts through in 2017, 2018. So they've always kind of tried to tell us, you know, it's always been there, you know, because you can't get this amount of people to conceal this. You know, Mike Brown calls it Eris. What is Eris? Eris is the goddess that wasn't invited to the ball. The goddess chaos, that, you know, Eris, the goddess of chaos. Yeah, she wasn't invited to the ball. The gods all met up and she wasn't invited, and she got very angry and drove the rest of the gods into war. And since then, you know, all of kind of like the moons of Jupiter have all been named on gods of the underworld. I mean, go figure. It's the same deal. It's over and over. But so you can imagine that's the point it crossed. That's the point it crossed. So if we're talking about 2010, 2011, it was still above us at that point. And these objects currently are coming in over us, which means that then the object would have been, if you like, the sun would have been down here and the system would have been up here, and my kind of elbow would have been planet X itself, and they would have come over the top and down, heading towards our sun, and down. Now they're coming kind of similar, but they're coming much further up and over. So they're coming in at a much steeper angle. When if you can imagine, if I come back over here to this aspect where I've got my cursor around here, when they're coming over here, they can cut through much more into this aspect. But once it gets further down here, this is coming round, and the whole system is dropping down below this ecliptic. They're coming over here. Sorry, let me just keep that there. They're coming over here. And so they're going to cross later over here, if that makes it. It's the aspect of this, because I'm only showing you from a single perspective. The next phase of this is showing this in many different levels, so you can see, because you're talking at multiple different angles, multiple different objects moving around. But it's not that complicated, but it is also enormously complicated. You could never write this in a book. You'd have to show with animations like this. But at this stage, you can imagine that in actual fact, well, let's just try to, because I'm overly complicating that possibly, but nonetheless, we can imagine that we come to 2010. What was the big earthquake? It was on the 27th of February 2010, an 8.8 in Chile, just like the one Carlos Ferrada predicted, and also very, very close to the date, except it wasn't the same object that caused it. It was, I'm calling it Kerberos this time, because Kerberos, Chiron's the big one, it's the furthest one away. I'm of a mind that is possibly not the one that's causing all the earthquakes themselves. It's the one that's running next to us as it goes around. It's got a slightly further, it's not crossing any orbital paths, but it runs next to a twin, you know, that is the one, in my opinion, that caused the 27th of February 2010, the massive earthquake. And then when we see it coming up through us there and causing, see how it's further ahead of Earth there, but the next year it's going to be closer to Earth. So let's just run that again. This one's, see, Hydra's coming around again, but it's nowhere near us at that stage. and we've got others going on there, but let's just try and stay with Charon and Kerberos for a moment on this point, because these are key, because now we come up to the Fukushima date, and we're going to see where the crossover point of this, because there's two phases here, there's either side, and that's what we've got to think about, because this was the aspect that was being affected at that point back in 2011, when the whole system was above us, and our sun and our solar system was ascending through the Jupiter system, or the Jupiter system was descending through our system as we rise and ascend through this. And so that's what we're coming through here. We come to the 11th of March 2011, and we can see that it's most likely, in my opinion, but I might be wrong, obviously it's just an opinion, these are just playing with the basic orbital mechanics of this, but you can see that this whole thing, as Jupiter heads round the Pluto system, or however you want to call this, I've put Jupiter's planets, I've put Pluto's planets around Jupiter, because I'm kind of playing with this. And so we can see what caused the 2011. But the thing is that these orbits are further away than Hydra. They're bigger, or they're faster moving, but they're not, well, I mean, they've got a bigger circumference, so they are faster moving, but in terms of their proportions of how long they take to take a duration, they actually take longer. And so, like when Hydra crossed us on that model on the 22nd of November, or say let's say the 22nd of November. No, let's say the December the 26th, 2004. It's smaller circumference orbit, smaller diameter, so it can cut through a bigger aspect of our solar system. It's not going to completely go round or just clip the edge. It's going to traverse right across, which means it's going to take 4 to 5 years before we experience the next aspect where it can affect us, where the next point of alignment is. Kerberos is going to come in, and it's going to very quickly reach that point where it's going to come to that place again, where it's going to be a crossing point. It's not going to be 4 years. It's more likely going to be 1 or 2 years. You know, it's difficult to say. And we're going to kind of, like I say, we're going to try and run through it. Maybe we'll see how we go. We're going to try and run through it with and put the overlays and the evidence with all of this. But you can imagine it's going to be let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. So what's the next kind of like? So from this point, you know, we've had. So let's bring in what's our next? What's the next? What's the next twin tail object? I'm just trying to think what to call it. What's the next twin tail object that we want to bring in now? Okay, so we just got this object coming in over here, Europa. Now this is the one that goes the other way around. It's got a kind of like, whatever you call it, a retrograde cycle compared to all of the others. And it's the one that Alex Luhan caught on let me just find that. It's basically this one. It's the shot that Alex Luhan got on the 1st of September 2000 and I think it was 2018. That way. Excuse me. But you remember it was, I think maybe it was 2019 actually. Sorry, that one's 2019. Yeah, 2019, on the 1st of September 2019, he posted that. And that is what I'm calling Europa. And that's dropping back. I think I've done that as to make all of the cycles, it drops back one, basically Earth goes around the sun 12 times, and that one goes back. I'm just trying to remember what the cycle is now, whether it's faster or slower. Well, look, you'll see it as we come in here, because this is where we were seeing all the tiny little sightings, but if we sort of we can just see how I've done it. It was just taking so long to so much. So it's coming in here. 2015. The first big shot of it that we got was 2016. Epic shot. These are the first shots that I've got of it. You think about. There's so many people throughout the history have seen these and made a massive song and dance about them. If you look at someone like before, in the lead up to 2011, before that, there had been many big sightings. I hadn't really seen that many of them. But Sam Hoffman, who was a kind of sky watcher, is a sky watcher, was massively seeing all of these things and talking about them. I, like so many people, was just thinking, oh, maybe these things are just massive, whatever, lenticular clouds and blah, 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 blah. But when you start seeing the formations and the earthquakes and the seismology, you start looking at them in a different way. But I could see them when they were small twin-tail objects. I could recognize them as kind of like, that's not right. That's a comet. That's a comet. I could understand that when they're so massive, they're just unbelievable. They're just unbelievable. But we've seen it so many times. We've got so much seismology and volcanism with all these things that we can really start seeing. So I'm going to start blowing you away. But we're just starting to bring this Europa into the equation, and it's going to come in now for Matt Rogers' big shot, which was, the shot where. This is obviously, like I say, the first of the shot that Alex Luhan got on the 1st of September 2019, where we saw it coming in and going out. It wasn't coming in, going round our sun, just like we saw Comet Neowise coming in the night sky, heading down towards the sun where the sun was about to rise, next to Venus. And we've been watching that. We'd seen this shot, the shot coming in on the 15th of August 2016. And then we'd, hopefully you're going to see it there. And Hydra's just coming through here. I just literally skipped past that. So we've got the massive earthquake in November. And we know now what's going to come up. We're just going to go through it. Okay, so we know that Hydra is going to meet us 2020-21. It's going to come around here and it's going to be affecting us over this period here. This is going to be the last in the week. It's August kind of 2021, I'd imagine. Before then it was July, the worst storms in China since 1930. Then it was just coming back. May, it was 2018, it was here. When Kilauea went off non-stop for 6 weeks, it's coming round like that. The other two, the pair, are getting closer and closer to us at this aspect. They're only just getting to us now. They're only finally affecting us since 2011, 2010. They're only just the twins or whatever. you know, Charon and Kerberos are only just starting to come into their big effect of us now. You'll see as we come round. So we had that in 2016, which means that in 2017, the big shot that came in on that kind of put me on the map was, do you remember on the Trump's inauguration, the massive shot that, I don't think I'm going to just try and find that one, I'll just overlay that one, but the massive shot that came in on the it came in on the 20th of January, or the 21st of January, but I think it was the 20th of January 2017, with 8.0 earthquake in Papua New Guinea, amazing sightings, just like absolutely sensational, loads of epic sightings of it. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And that obviously put me on the map, but the next 200-day anomaly, which was a completely different object, I always thought must have been the same object. I was perplexed. But Steve Olsen had organised a big conference for the time of the eclipse in August. It was the 15th. No, the flyby happened on the 17th of August 2017. I believe the 17th of August, and that was, you know, the day when the ESO recorded, the European Southern Observatory recorded a massive gravitational anomaly, and said, you know, press release and all around the world, you know, something, you know, the massive thing had occurred, and gravitational anomalies had gone off, and we had the sightings all across the Atlantic. Literally, as I was flying into America to go to, you know, the big eclipse gathering and go to Steve Olsen's big conference on Planet X, where he had all the you know, so many big speakers on the whole Planet X thing, and we came in for the time of that sighting. I turned up for the time of that sighting. That was Europa coming in here. And what else have we got going on? At this stage, we're not, you know, that was the stage when Europa, that the closest inner orbiting one, it doesn't actually swing round the sun at all. It goes in between us and the sun. It doesn't go all the way round. It was just an overwhelming thing when we saw that shot from Alex Luhu on the 1st of September 2019, and we could clearly see, we'd seen it coming in before with this shot on the, I believe, the 3rd of July 2019, just as I was expecting. I was like, look out for it, here it comes. The bit that this is the first aspect, the first kind of cycle that we really started grappling with, or I really started grappling with, understanding. And it's morphed into this much bigger understanding for all the different flybys and the patterns that go on and the seismology that you can predict with this. So let's come around now to the next big one that absolutely blew my model apart, my initial model apart, and we come around to let's just go back a little bit, and we come around to 2018. Where we saw on May the 4th of May 2018, Kilauea go off massively, and this is of course May is when we saw the volcano go off on, well, actually it didn't happen in May. What we saw in May 2018 on Mars was we saw what was it? Yeah, it was a dust storm that basically killed the Opportunity rover, and there was a massive, you know, something happened that caused a massive dust storm all over Mars. All its land features disappeared. And Curiosity rover, was it Curiosity? Opportunity. Curiosity went down in 2003, ironically, when the last shot it got, you know, my first video I ever made, I think, the Martian think tank, when Curiosity went down in 2003 after shooting what was clearly a tank, massive object, and then and it goes down, and it's just, you know, one of my first videos. Anyway, not Curiosity. Apologies. So 2018, we're now crossing the ecliptic. So we're seeing these epic shots. We saw kind of like Seven Spalding got the amazing shot where you can see it. We can see one of the twins coming in. One of the twins, as either Kerberos or Charon, coming in. There were a few video makers who caught it at that stage, running in our night sky because it wasn't coming down above the ecliptic or below the ecliptic. It was running next to our ecliptic for the first time. So we were getting this this unusual perspective in 2018. Plus, it was running next to us, so it could run right next to us and cause these massive storms in May. And then, of course, you know, we get look where it's coming. You can see it's going right over the top of Mars. You can see it's going to go right over the top of Mars and cause the storm here. You can see it's going to come right between next to us here and cause Kilauea to go off non-stop for six weeks, like Niagara Falls, pumping it out, like the moon pulling on the oceans of the earth. We can see that now. We've had this one for, well, this is the latest one that I'm bringing in, so we can see Hydra doing that part of it now. And what else have we next got coming in? We've got Kerberos and Charon making their way back in. But now, like I say, they're coming in over the top. They're coming round the back of Pluto, being pulled back, going over the top of Pluto, being pulled in towards our sun, going over the top of our sun and going all the way around like that. So it's a much, they're not coming, it's a slightly, you know, when you start playing these out, as we do one big cycle after this, we'll start looking at those aspects, because you've got to make your own mind up of how you're going to perceive this and see this and understand, because if there's a lot of fear that could be generated by looking at this, thinking, oh my God, these massive things are flying around causing earthquakes and volcanoes. But we've seen two volcanoes, we've seen two volcanic eruptions on Mars since this has been going on. We saw it in September 2020, and we saw it in, ironically, September 2018 again, ironically, possibly because, well, we're gonna come to that, and maybe we're at that now, in actual fact. So let's just see. Aha! So you can see Europa came in. Do you remember 2018? I'd made the video, so I'd forgot about that aspect, because this, as Europa came in here, can we see Europa? Europa's here. It's coming in now. Now, this is when I made the video and I said, you cannot tell me there's not going to be oceanic anomalies. We've seen them at Rogers shot in 2016. We've seen the epic shot of it coming in 2017. We've got this, we knew the patterns of this. We've got this aspect of it absolutely down solid. It absolutely cannot change it. You could not tell me. I said, you cannot tell me. We're not going to get oceanic anomalies at that time. That's when we see the man bareback riding his house in a liquefaction earthquake into a coming tsunami on the 28th of September 2018. I made the video before. I was like, guys, you know, there's certain aspects of this we've got to isolate, and this thing is offering us, if we're willing to look at it, an absolute picture. We could look at it from a God-fearing perspective, or we could look at it from another perspective that is giving us an opportunity to understand and triangulate our exact place, not just in the galaxy, but potentially in the universe. You know, we've been given a very big picture. If we stay out of the fear of this and we go into the analytical orbital mechanics of it, we can get a much bigger picture. So we saw that 2018, and then we come to oh, we come to the epic shots. Do you remember the crazy shot that Steve Olsen put up in 2018? I always loved that shot so much. We've got to be able to dig that one up. Where is it? Maybe I'll just overlay that one. But Steve Olsen kind of showed them on his channel back in the day. It was around about it was early January. It was early January. I don't really want to take that one down right now because that was such a good shot there. Just keep coming back to. Maybe I have got it somewhere. Maybe I got it somewhere. Let's keep flashing over. I was there. Those shots there. Just bring those up. Bring those in a little bit. He posted those. Possibly the same thing. Possibly the twins. I don't think it is the twins. I think that's the big Hydra coming in, and possibly that's the twin. Possibly they're the same thing, the distant twin. But the fact that you can see light there and you can see light there, if it was the twins, it could have been ahead of us. It really could have been way ahead of us at that stage. You know, it's getting closer and closer to us, and we'd expect it to be closer to the sun than this one. But we could imagine we could see multiple of them. A really big one, but they're all quite. You know, this is a real close point. You know, this November, December, January time is always a busy time, and for this system. So we come back to. So that's Hydra coming in here for Steve Olsen's big shot there. And we know that we've got obviously this big activity coming up around 2021, 22, 23, where the ones that caused Fukushima and the 2010 earthquake. We know that's not coming. In the big cycle, we've seen that big cycle running right throughout time of the furthest orbiting object. That was the one that, you know, the Charon, that was the one that would have caused the Carrington event in 1859 when this whole system was coming closer to us. That was the object, like I say, that Robert Harrington back in the 70s would have seen, you know, when he discovered the first moon supposedly of Pluto. You know, this is how they build this story to hide this massively complex system that you're living in. I mean, it's quite mad. But okay, so let's keep going, and we're going to come to 2019. You know, notice that it's all starting to affect this aspect. This is the main aspect now that's being affected. It's not all happening over here, and it's actually not all happening over here. These objects are now, every time they're coming in over here, they're getting further and further away. They're just getting very, very small. We see them big when they come out here, but they're much further away at this point. They're all just distant objects. All the shots, we've done this stuff. We did it back in the sort of like this is where these were the intense points, and now it's very small. Now the big point is all the exits of all the biggest ones around this edge here, from April round to August. That's what's coming in. That's what this is all about now. So let's go to. You know, round about here last year, you know, we had a lot of incredible sightings. I'll put some of those over the top. You know, we were getting lots of stuff going on, but basically, you know, last year it was really to this point. We were seeing all this stuff, but it was up above us in the northern hemisphere of our solar system, coming down to cross, but the alignments weren't there. You know, let's go round to, you know, we're talking about crazy storms here. We're talking about crazy storms in China, crazy earthquakes, crazy, you know, there's a lot of intense stuff that's going. You know, all our summers fall apart at this point. Everything goes crazy at this point, and it has been for the last few years over this point. This is when the dams are all kind of starting to collapse. They're all shaking. Everything. Hydra is shaking the base. But it won't actually cross, in my opinion, till August. It won't cross till August. And we saw it eclipse the sun. We saw Nick Thomas have an amazing shot of it on the 9th of July. On the 9th of July, just before my mum passed on the 20th of July last year, 2020. We saw this epic shot from Egypt of the sunset, and you could just see it eclipse, and that on my mind is that's Hydra, except that I've got Hydra too far forward here. And that's the mistake in this timeline. And when we actually start running the whole, when I run the whole sequence later, and we do the big calendar over the top, and we come into this and we just let it run through, you're gonna see that I've got this slightly out, but I could obviously alter that and try and change that down and redo that. But the thing about it was that if I slow it down at that point, I've got to do the whole thing, and it's taken me so long to get this, and I delete so many layers because it takes me so long to build this, like my computer can't handle it, that it's very difficult for me to go back. I could, like I say, delete that part and just redo it. But the whole point about all my models is that when I run a cycle, I don't change the speed. They all keep their ratio together. And if the model works, they recur. And you can see that this is the difference. I need to take this back. And if I take it back each of the cycles, I'll get the sequence. But when I'd run the whole thing, I'd had a slightly different version of it in my mind. And when I'd built it, I realised it was too late, and I'd got it slightly too far forward. So I'm just saying that because I knew we'd get to this point when it would go further forward, and I'm of mind it's slightly further back here, and I've got the proportions of it slightly wrong. But you can understand that it would all still work absolutely perfect. There's nothing that still falls massively too far out if I bring that back. And if I bring that back more and allow that to occur in 2020, 21, that point, well, let's just keep going forward. You'll see. I think hopefully you're going to understand what I mean when I come round to. So we've got Chiron and Kerberos coming up again. They're starting to fall out the way they've drifted off in the way I've done the overlays here. Because truly, I don't really know, but they're still, in my opinion, they're coming way over the top of us at the moment. They're not coming kind of under, so I've kind of tried to move them away from this position here a little bit, but it hasn't really worked in their kind of final aspect. But more what I'm trying to suggest is they're not going to kind of come down and cut through the kind of the February-March position. They're going to sort of come right over, and because they're going to have to come right over, they're going to have to keep going right over. They're going to come down in kind of April, May, when we're going to meet the one that caused Fukushima. And in my opinion, though, if this system really is dropping down below our solar system and descending through it, logic is. It's very difficult to show on that, but so let's just keep that going to 2020. Hydra's coming up, doing the same things it did, caused the biggest storms since 1930 this year, or last year in 2020. This is when it got really bad. This is when the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River was just reaching absolute critical mass, and so this is and obviously this is the point that I realised that Hydra is actually back here. Hydra is actually here. This is where if you like, I've put this too far. Hydra is actually cutting through over here, and it's the other objects. I've just cut into this too much, and it's cutting around much more. And in my opinion, it's going to be August that in 2021, it's going to, if there's one that could potentially cause an eclipse, it's it's the April passage by Charon, but in my opinion, Charon is still going to be ahead of us. We're just going to come around. But understand that this, in my opinion now, after building the model, because I build these models to try and grapple with how they move, so I can make the corrections. So next time I can build it, I can start, and then I can start finding ways to incorporate so much more. I've also left this little black dot over here because we've got something that seems to obscure our view of this big system, whether it's always just lost in the daylight sky, which seems unlikely because of where I'm positioning it, or whether there is something actually, some kind of obfuscation that is actually up there, like some black dot. Mr. MBB333 caught such a thing late last year, an epic shot of something that seemed to be obscuring the, he got some amazing shots last year of all of this system, and I think I showed you those. But we kind of saw this when we saw a comet nearwise. Now, what you can't see here really very clearly is because the other thing I've got here, we can also see that the other mistake I've got made is actually Pluto would be a little bit more further round here. So that's the August, and I put Pluto over here. August, it's almost like, remember, Planet X is over here, that all these things are orbiting, but where the center of where all these objects are much more coming in this, slightly more in the September position. So I've got some of their angles slightly out, I think. But remember, this is our attempt to try and put 1800 years of movement into a single motion. And then, like I say, we're going to go back to the 262 where we start this, and I'll show you the bigger cycle of what feeds into this, and what I'm going to call I call it the Galileo Zodiac, but you could also call it the Wat Tyler Zodiac. You could call it the Peasants' Revolt Zodiac. You could call it the point where humanity becomes very, very powerful. And this is when they really try and suppress us. This is when Galileo was put under house arrest, silenced, not allowed to express his truth, because this is what he was saying he was seeing. And this is the only way he could have seen what he's seeing. There's no other way that you could have this type of involvement with these systems. There's just no other way of getting around it. God knows I have tried so many variations. Remember, my advantage with this is only that I can build these animations and stack these systems and start calculating these. My predecessors couldn't do that. They didn't have the type of technology that enabled them to run these kind of like these simulations, so we could actually experiment with these orbits and see how they go. But sure enough, we kind of run the models after that. After all we saw, we made all the predictions. We kind of knew that that Hydra was going to come back round, and sure enough, it came back round. And I think that's why you can see as it comes around here, Hydra, just focusing on Hydra for a shake, as it comes around, I'm of a mind it's going to be steeper, and it's going to be much more over there, over that way. Now, the reason I say that is because of the seismology. It's not just because I'm doing these pretty little diagrams, and I'm showing you, I'm seeing the patterns in the earthquakes, and I can take these patterns back to the same sort of things that happen in 1939, and then the earthquakes that happened in kind of like 1945 and 46. We're seeing the same sort of patterns where we see big earthquakes occurring round about, right, the massive one that Carlos Ferrada predicted on the 20th of January 1939, and then you get the subsequent earthquakes, and you start seeing the bigger earthquakes occurring about 4 or 5 years later round about the August position. And so we're getting these crossing points, and we're kind of seeing that there's these aspects that that these earthquakes reoccur. We're starting to see the same sort of pattern, the same sort of things. And so if we come now back to April 2021, what we're coming up to next, where do we see Kerberos? So I've got Kerberos coming through here. And this is where, because I was thinking that we were going to bring it was going to come back to 2000, it is going to come back to that same point, 2023. You know, the irony is that if you go to 2023, the 20th of January 2023, the perihelion point, the closest point where Jupiter is officially like I say, closest to supposedly our sun. And you go back one orbital duration of Jupiter, you come to, ironically, virtually exactly the 11th of, round about very close to the 11th of March 2011, when Fukushima went bang. And you get this pattern. You can go right back in history and follow this pattern and see this seismology happening right back to when we first started getting, well, I mean, it just runs back. It's, we'll explore that in two shakes. But my point being is that when I started realizing that 2023 point, when Chiron, if we're going to call it, or Kerberos, caused the one that caused Fukushima, we come back to that point from the perspective of us cutting through, of this whole system cutting through the ecliptic plane. Like I say, I'm of a mind that we're not really actually going to see. We're not going to be that close to it at that point. It's going to be, like I say, it's going to be way above us, in my opinion. Which kind of implies that we haven't seen it yet, and we know we've got to see it either 2023 or before. That aspect of it. And if it is, I've kind of put it up like that because I don't want to say that we are going to go exactly, going to get eclipsed by that exactly, because I don't know really. What I've done it further forward is because I'm of a mind that we're much more likely to cut through the tail of this big object is above us now. It's just caused all the big earthquakes that you've just seen. The one that's just happened outside of New Zealand, between Fiji and outside of and New Zealand. The big earthquake, and the seismology that's happening in Iceland and everything else like that right now. It's Kerberos or Chiron, or basically both of them. All of these objects have basically come round. See Hydra there. I've got them a little bit kind of like messed up a little bit, but basically Hydra, Chiron and Kerberos are all coming to this central aspect above us here. They're coming in. But you can imagine that all of these objects, these three objects, have come in and over. They've all met. This has come really big over us when it was here, and it's now above us over here. These are basically up above us over here, slightly ahead of us at the moment. We're all going round. We're going round. They're effectively going round. They're all meeting up above us at the moment. That was the third phase of the moon. And until I'd built this, I couldn't understand why there were three. And then suddenly it all made sense of the errors I've made in building this model. And so it's fraught with mistakes and everything else like that. And it's a very, very, very complicated thing to take you through there. It's 2 months of work that that probably confuses you way more than puts you in the sort of picture, really. But you know, I see two pivotal points in two. Even though we've got three objects, I see two potential points that we've got coming up now. I see April, you know, the point where we're going to potentially go through the tail of this Kerberos or Charon, whatever you want to call the furthest or the penultimate orbiting object, you know, and we've got this Hydra that we've got to go past in, you know, eclipsed us in July last year, and it's going to be closer to us in August, as I thought it was the other way around. This whole model has changed. So let's go forward now and let's go back. Let's go way back, and let's go back to just do a summary, an overview up to the time when they discovered Pluto. Just a quick kind of, and what I'll do is I'll just put this over here, I'll put this counter over here, and you'll notice that what I've got going here is I'm just doing this to show you I'm trying to show you not so much the Galileo Zodiac, I'm trying to give you something so you can understand the idea of a Wat Tyler Zodiac, just to give you the picture of Wat Tyler, because Wat Tyler was 1381, and 1381 is going to come in on this date, and 1666 is going to come in on this date, and 262 is going to come in on this date, but 1381 is a specific date, because that's the date for me that really demonstrates the type of energy that this is about. This is when, you know, the King of England, King Richard II, and he was a kid, 10 years of age. His father was Longshanks, Edward I. He died. His great-granddaddy was Henry III, whose great and makes his great granddaddy King John, who signed the Magna Carta. So we're in that kind of like just coming out of that Robin Hoody kind of era, in that kind of like time with the Magna Carta, that kind of all that sort of stuff. We're going to explore that, but just that time when the king's 10 years of age, because his dad's died and he's now inherited the throne, and the mayor of London has taken control of the country, and running the country for the king, for the 10-year-old king, and he's imposed the poll tax, and the poll tax collectors are just going in the houses and basically taking all the money and raping the women as well. It's just complete and utter. He's abandoned all human rights, and suddenly one of the poll tax rights collectors goes into Wat Tyler's house, sees his daughters, thinks, I'll have a bit of them, rapes them, and he of course kills them. And the whole village takes his side and says, look, we're all doomed now. We're just going to have to sort of like go on and try and persuade everyone else to join us, because basically if we don't, there's only one way out of this now. There's no other option. It's catch-22. It's just absolute death or absolutely stand up. You lose everything. You've got basically everything to lose and everything to gain. It's all or nothing on the table. That was the picture. Everything was on the table. And so they went and got the village after village, and they all joined up, and that became the Peasants' Revolt. And the whole of London, kind of like the whole of the country, basically arrived at London and summoned Richard II, 10-year-old boy, who supposedly the mayor of London and this little 10-year-old boy, this king boy, met, and in Mile End or somewhere like that in London, I think it was, and this is where the story of the dagger of London, you know, all this sort of stuff comes from, because that's a dagger that basically the king said, the 10-year-old boy just said yes to all Wat Tyler's demands. He said, we want just fairness, we want decency, we want humanity, we want we want human rights, we want to go back to the old way. We don't mind paying our taxes if you're giving us stuff in return, and we've got work, and we've got good stuff going on, let's work together. And the king said yes. And of course the mayor of London strutted forth on his horse and said, well done, sonny boy, and went to pat him on the shoulder, but supposedly, as some stories go, run the dagger across his neck and cut his throat. And they knew after that, there was just like kings knew they had to serve human rights. And ironically, just before that, like 35 years before the peasants' revolt, which sits on this timeline exactly, and I'm going to take you around it and show you why. You had a massive plague that decimated Europe. It just wiped out most of Europe. There was so little workforce. It was so difficult to get anyone to do the work that everything was falling apart. So they were decimated by a plague. Isn't it interesting? You're going to see a lot of plagues in this time. So let's start here, where we're going to start the year 2, and even though it says 77 years, it actually should just say 77 AD, and I've just stopped on a few dates here. Notice that we've got Pluto here, and this is very rough overlays. It's just to try and give a bit of a ballpark figure of how this is potentially orbiting, but it really could be that, like I say, more likely that all of the objects are orbiting Pluto with an accentuated 12-year orbit caused by Jupiter within that, which is probably, but we don't know. But it takes our sun about 297, 294, something like that, years to go around once. It takes Pluto about 350 years to go around once. And so we get this kind of cycle. Obviously, it's going around more times than this. I've just slowed this down a little bit, just to give you an idea of what's happening there, really. And I've literally just taken Jupiter's moons here, and I've put them over the top of actually Jupiter, just to kind of give you a bit of an idea of some of these bits. But we're going to stop here at 263. Because 263, notice we're coming to a crossing point here, and this is these points. From here, it's above the ecliptic of the Planet X system, and when it comes through here, it drops below the ecliptic of the Planet X system. So we have these really close proximity passage points where we get our points of crossing. This is where all the fun starts. So right now we're really close, but at 262 we get earthquakes all across Europe, all across Asia, all across Africa. Now in history we're told, and then we get plagues. We get plagues that rip through and annihilate, or should I say decimate Rome. And the massive fault line that runs underneath, the fault line that caused the 26th of April 1986 earthquake, which destroyed Chernobyl, literally. That same earthquake runs up, and then it runs up, and it's basically that whole ridge of volcanoes that is, or a big part of it is that ridge of volcanoes that is basically Italy sits on. Italy shook, volcanoes spewed, Europe shook, Africa shook, Asia shook. Plagues ran riot, and Rome was decimated. I say decimated because the Europeans, or what they were calling the Goths, came in, saw the opportunity of spoils of all this wealth that had been robbed from all of these people by the Romans for 1,000 years, and just went and just saw the easy pickings of Rome on its knees, believing up until that point that Jupiter, that was its god, and Jupiter had come in and decimated it, utterly decimated. Now 300 years before, supposedly, a man following a star has said that a great reckoning was coming, that God, the justice was coming, and Rome would fall. And sure enough, just as he predicted, Rome was annihilated. It wasn't until Constantine in something like 313, something like that. I'm not too sure the exact date. The Roman emperor that converted to Christianity because he was God-fearing. After that point, the emperor was scared of the prophecy of Jesus. 262 was when Jesus' prophecy arrived. Not now. This is the same thing that occurred, and the same lessons can be garnered. That which sits below the table of decency is removed from this planet by this system. This is the regulator, the harmonizer. This is the big cleaner that was created by the big gods that run this outpost, that keep it under control, that stops this little outpost becoming septic and spewing out aggression and pollution to the greater universe. So that was 262. 262 was when Jesus arrived. This was the closest aspect. And then we keep going, and I've stopped on a few dates here. You'll notice that we're just getting further and further and further. We're moving faster than the system. We're getting further and further away. We come to the time Muhammad now. And we're getting almost opposite to the point of 1,000-year point. And now we get to the exact 1,000-year point, and we're almost directly opposite. Let's just see if I can notice any specific dates that I really want to kind of jump out on, and because now now we're directly opposite. We're kind of in this kind of period where we're in the period of the Crusades, of the Crusades. We're coming to the year the Magna Carta was signed. 1262. Well, 1262 was also a time of famines, massive crop failure. 1262 led to what led to 1264, which was basically a massive. I always wondered why I'm so fascinated by these dates. This part of history, this was the Great Warlord who arrived at this point here. 1262, massive famine in Britain, massive famine, and 1264 you had the Battle of Lewes, which was a massive battle which involved many kings. And we have a very similar story to what happened in Wat Tyler's day, where it was all 1264, the Battle of Lewes, the Battle of Democracy, all of the kings defeated by Simon de Montfort, who did a lot of the killing in Europe. Basically, you watch these movies where you sort of see kind of like these mafioso bosses that are so aggressive, that big, powerful politicians and the such use them to do heinous crimes, and to, you know, the Pope might send them off to go and kill unbelievable loads of people, like he sent Simon de Montfort, the elder, off to go and kill 30,000 Cathars in around about about that same time, 1214. That was about the same time that Simon de Montfort was off killing Cathars in the south of France for the Pope to get all his titles. But of course, once he started killing and he started getting his titles, and they realised that he could do it, they would never let him go. They were just going to send him on to other places and other places. Of course, Simon de Montfort the Elder died killing Cathars in France. His head went through his chest cavity and into his heart when a massive great stone landed on his head. But his son, Simon de Montfort, also went on to become the scrapper of of Britain, and led the charge against all of the kings, supposedly. As in King of England. Who was the King of England? Yeah, Henry III. Henry III, and his son, and his brother, King of Germany, and who became King of Scotland. So 4 kings up against supposedly one man and a bunch of Londoners. Doesn't work. Totally impossible. Not true. Complete and utter bullshit. It was a massive revolution. Clearly, it was a Wat Tyler revolution, and that's what I'm trying to get you to see in these PowerPoints in this thing. 1274. That's when the top of the tour fell down because of a massive earthquake. You can see these. 1381. You get it again there. You know, you're going to see many. I'm just bringing these dates down so you can just see some of these reoccurring dates that might what have we got coming up there? So we've got 1559, 1571, 1583. 1583, well, that's pivotal because the clocks changed in 1582. So the Catholics changed the clocks in 1582. They went from a Julian calendar, from a 13-month calendar, to a 12-month Gregorian solar calendar in 1582. We didn't change it till 1752, I don't think, as in Britain and America. We didn't change it till much later, but certainly Europe, they changed it in 1582. Then 1588, you have the Great Tempest that destroys the Spanish Armada. Massive storm that wipes out the biggest fleet to ever set sail. 2 years later, Shakespeare performs his first play. The works of Shakespeare suddenly appear 2 years after Queen Elizabeth has just annihilated the entire Spanish Armada with a massive tempest. No one knows how she knew that such a massive storm was going to come in. And yet now we look at Uranus. We look at Uranus and we see all the planets are named after after his first Shakespeare's, well, many of his characters in his Shakespeare's play, because they were discovered in 99 supposedly, and we name them after. And the first one, we've got Prospero, and Prospero was the name of the character, the great wizard in his first play, in The Tempest, the one who controls Ariel, the boding spirit that brings all that have wronged Prospero to the shores of his island to enact his redemption. He has control of this magic power he calls Ariel. This play is released 2 years after. It's all the finest work. That's what's literally has happened. This is why I wrote the book Laughing Gas, to tell you of this epic conspiracy tale. The most epic of all conspiracy tales. How all of the finest work was brought together. Brought together by Sir Francis Bacon, who wrote himself, inspired by the person who put him in power, Queen Elizabeth herself, and John Dee, working with John Dee. And they they were the grammarians. that took all of England's best literature and rewrote it under Queen's English, as in Queen Elizabeth I's attempt to unite a broken country that had been divided by the Catholic rule, every different barrier they could divide and create conflict across. And of course, the biggest were the lingual barriers. The first big thing big continents do to come together is generally get rid of lingual barriers to unite. They united, and they also created contractual English for business. So you had past, present, future, you had possessive, and you had non-possessive. You had this idea of ownership through this language. It meant that contracts could be much more kind of like there was spelling, there were spells, quite literally. And so all this was born out of this time, this massive jump in how things were operated and everything else of that. The first play, 1590, the first dwarf planet ever discovered, 1597, Ceti B, Mirror. Then we come immediately straight into Kepler. And Kepler's laws, observing, what's he observing? What's new up there? We're all seeing all these new dwarf planets. We've got Galileo discovers 4 new moons of Jupiter. He's silent. How can you be? You have to be silenced. We saw Jupiter just like Galileo saw Jupiter. We're seeing the same 4 planets. It's taken me this long to work it out, how they move. Still errors, a few little errors, but it's, this is that exact time, 1595. I mean, the dwarf planet was discovered in 1596, maybe 97, but I think it's 1596. But 1607, this is kind of like Gregorian. You remember the tsunami that occurred right where I kind of keep my caravan in Glastonbury? Because basically, the tsunami here was recorded on the 20th of January 1606. That's where you see the brass tacks or the brass plates nailed to the kind of top of the roof beam, or the ancient church beams that are still standing, the churches that are still standing, where the water came up to their steeples, and these were quite high. They were obviously they were low, but because the water came right round, the sea literally came in. But I mean, the water came up a massive way. Glastonbury became the Sea of Avalon again. The sea came out. It wasn't drained out for another kind of 150 years by the Dutch that wanted to get to the peak. And so that's when the water was drained out and dam was built across. But we are in dangerous times in early August, 6th to the 8th of August. We got some big stuff coming in by the looks of it. And we got some debris kind of quite close to us, I reckon. And we're close to it now. We're really close to it because it's above us now. But it's there, but it's causing earthquakes and everything else like that. This is beginning now. This is our big cycle now. So we've got lots going on. So let's keep it's going on. We've got 1607. That's when the big tsunami. 12th of January 1607 is basically when the tsunami occurred that caused the massive tsunami that occurred here that killed loads of people. It's just a massive event that occurred in British history. One of the few places where we really have tsunamis in this neck of the woods because of that bottleneck between kind of Wales and Somerset, kind of Cornwall, where you've got that kind of, it just faces basically straight out to the Atlantic. A big surge coming up. You can imagine we're going to look at what's happened in the last kind of like few months as well, and we're going to see what's actually happened as well. We're going to conclude with that, but let's just get us back up to we've done 1607. We're coming back around now to kind of like Isaac Newton's time, 1680-81, where he was discovering Halley's Comet, and we were going through all the same sort of things, and so we've pretty much done that, and now we're going to come around to 1859 sort of thing. We come to the Carrington event, where we are finally getting so close to these systems that we're because these points here are very close, but actually the whole system itself is getting so on top of us now that we are starting to get direct flybys at this point as we're coming in, and this is what causes the Carrington event, a massive event that affects not just California or LA or wherever the pylons came down, but the whole globe was just massively affected by this event. And then we come up to the discovery of Pluto and 1930, but you'll notice that you'll see these dates are real. 1904, our governments are always going to try and direct us into war and aggression. That's when Britain invaded Tibet in 1916, right in the middle of the kind of like the Second World War. Then we come to 1939, we're just starting the Second World War, literally as we go into it. 1951, we come to the point where with crazy storms, that's when the Energy Act was created. That's when we started building the first nuclear power stations. The carbon dioxide kind of story was all kind of like Churchill started basically the first environmental act, the Clean Air Act. 63, lots of dams collapse and that sort of stuff because of crazy storms. I seem to remember, same thing with 75. Intense times, crazy storms, dams collapsing, all that sort of stuff. 87, same sort of thing, crazy storms, nuclear reactors going bang, crazy earthquakes, big volcanoes. 99, and I said this is the year Carlos Rada predicted it would come back next to us, and that's the point. It's not the point when it's actually directly next to us. It's the point when it goes almost right round behind us, and the furthest orbiting objects of it start interacting with specific parts of us. So there's some very peculiar characteristics, and that goes back to the beginning again. So I'm sorry it's been such a long video. So we've kind of like, I'm gonna have to put a load of overlays over that and just kind of like just to kind of, it kind of is what it is, I guess, and I guess we just need to go now to just to what's actually gone down in the since December December the 25th, when we got these sightings. I've showed you that that sighting was also just before that, and we'd seen all the big earthquakes, we'd seen the big volcanoes. There was that shot on the December the 28th. That's potentially what I'm calling Hydra. That's what I'm just. That's what, with loads and loads of shots of it. It was a really amazing shot. I mean, how this can just keep going on and people just sweeping it all under the carpet, it just amazes me when we know we've got also around about this time one of the European Eastern European countries shut down their nuclear reactors. I'm not too sure which one it was. That, I'm assuming, is the same shot by Brandon Corey Nagley, or just another shot of it, but was there earthquakes then? He was talking about, yeah, earthquakes as well. So we know it's nearby. Again, Area 55. This to me is not. This is not. It's possibly getting close to the twins, but I'm of a mind that this is now what I'm calling Europa in that video. Just the retrograde one just going off. We'd seen it coming in, and we'd finally seen it going out, and that's it. We're getting further away from it then, and it's just moving away from us. It's getting smaller then, or possibly that's one of the twins. But I'd imagine to see it at that distance with its other twin. So this is what I'm calling Hydra. This was a shot that Brandon Corey put up on the 8th of Jan. And then, of course, 9th of Jan we saw snow. We saw, the we're kind of seeing the axis of the Earth tilt possibly back or come forward. Whatever's going on, we know we're near lots of objects that are flying in between us and the sun, and they're twisting the axis of our Earth. Kind of like snow. South of Spain is buried under snow, and the whole of Spain is buried under snow. It becomes absolutely zero. It becomes so freezing, and at the same time, January 6th, we see there's a massive 50 degree spike increase from like minus. Well, I've just got it in. You can just see it. I mean, it was just a massive spike in temperature in the North Pole. I'm always thinking in centigrade, so I'm always kind of like, but you can just see that was a spike. You know, apparently it was a 50 degree Celsius rise, so it went from like minus 30 to about 20 degrees Celsius or something like that. In the course over a couple of days, and Spain goes into the freezing. The whole planet twisted with the movement of Hydra as it went past at that aspect. You know, that is, it crossed us in kind of late November, December, and we'd seen the tsunami in Greece and the earthquake in Turkey at the same time as it had come in. We'd seen Venice go under the water just before Christmas on a neap tide in between the full and the new moon, and it was like a king tide, and we're just supposed to watch all of these massive seismic activities going on, and all the flybys coming in, the pairs, the threes, the whole shaboodle. You know, and we're only just talking about COVID. Did you even know there was a kind of like a tsunami in Greece? There was a tsunami yesterday. Admittedly, it was only a small one, but it was a big earthquake out at sea. And this is just the opening. This is whether you want to call it Kerberos or whether you want to call it Sharon. It's opening. This is its introduction. This is the first time you've seen activity from this one since 2010. Just get the size of what's coming in this next phase. We've got a big year this year. Where were we? We're just running up the pathway, and then we come to this one coming up here, which was posted by Mr. MBB 333 on the 10th of Jan. It looks like it was originally filmed on the 8th of Jan. And you just look at the debris that he's seeing. It's just like the 2018 Wrap the News shot, where he just shows you all the asteroids in the December sky. And there's just like this, just trillions of them, but there's obviously not as many here. But it's a very similar thing. It's a very, very, very similar thing. You know, and there's a few shots where you just see a load more of them, and they've just zoomed right in there. There's a bit of a better shot of it, but you can just see that it looks like they're just sitting there. But in reality, this thing is traveling almost with us at that stage. In between us, virtually moving very near the same speed as us. These objects at this stage are very, very slow moving. And potentially the objects that are going to be near us in kind of April, May are going to be very slow moving as well. You know, if we are behind the main object and nestled closer to the tail, we could be in front of it. But it seems, that's what I thought it was before I built this new model, when I've been able to correct all this different stuff with all the latest data. And I've been edging closer and closer. It's just been so difficult. But we just keep running forward with all of these. We saw that shot. That was posted for quite a few different people, and I just found that quite interesting. another person calling it Dobbs object, or Dobbs object. Meteorite, that was January the 27th. That is potentially one of either what we were calling nearwise, the one that came in July and then went out in late November. Sorry, it didn't go out in late November. This was the other confusing thing, is the one that went out on late November, the one that came in July 2020 is actually is this one here. And it's also, do you remember the shot that Calvin looking for Hobbs did? Have I got it? Have I got it? Have I got it? That one. He posted that, I think it was on the 15th of October 2020. It was just an epic shot. You can see the main sphere. This is one, I thought I had this one completely wrong. This is Hydra. This is Hydra. This is what we were calling nearwise in that cycle that I turned up to see when Steve Olsen. This is the one that caused the big ESO gravitational anomaly. This is the one that Matt Rogers caught on the 15th of August 2016. This is just an epic shot. It's just a fantastic capture. It's just an epic piece of work. It's just an epic piece of footage. You can see all this debris in the tail and that sort of stuff. You can just get an idea of it all there. This is the shot, this is the side profile of the same thing that Matt Rogers caught on the 15th of August 2016. That's most sensational. They put Matt Rogers on the shot, on the table. It was a lot of effort. And you realise that, we can plot all this and everything else like that, but you could lay stones down if you couldn't count to calculate how the moon, the duration of the moon, and just drop stones down. You wouldn't need a good degree or anything. This is just seeing where these things come and where they go and just working on all the different patterns. And we start seeing these bigger patterns, but you don't need brains to do this. You need something else to speak this out, because you're going to be up against a lot of criticism and a lot of people feeling that it's a bit kind of nerdy to talk about this, and a lot of people that are very attached to the idea of building nuclear power stations on fault lines to stop the carbon dioxide spew, even though we're utterly dependent on carbon dioxide and we don't like to admit it. Like we've seen 2 volcanoes going off on Mars since we've been observing it, and obviously they deny they're volcanoes. We saw one going off, ironically, just before when this came in, or when the other one came out, the one that I'm calling Hydra, that I'm of a mind that will affect us in August. When that went out, realistically, probably it was Europa coming in that triggered the big volcano, but we also saw like 40 volcanoes going off, 40 new volcanoes going off on Venus, and we were all right next to each other at that point. We were all literally right next to each other at that point. And yet, we've demonized this kind of carbon dioxide and that sort of stuff. But I've got to tell you that all these flybys that we're getting are creating all these volcanoes. You cannot have life on a planet without a massive feed of carbon dioxide. These flybys are actually feeding the carbon dioxide, which is keeping this planet alive. It's carbon dioxide. The oceans take up good 30 to 40% of all our carbon dioxide, and we're all fighting over the rest of it so we can digest this planet, because carbon dioxide is how we break down this planet, and we digest the kind of rock into kind of like digestible units so we can build matter and life on this planet. So we need carbon dioxide. There's a very low percentage of it ever available. There's only like 0.02, 3, 4% literally available at any time, because it gets so consumed by the environment, because it's so needed for every aspect of life on this planet. That's why it's such a low count, because there's so much on this planet that wants it and needs it to create life, that the more we pump out, the more that's available to us. And so, we're looking at all this thing and thinking, oh my God, this is terrifying. But this is quite possibly how life is not destroyed on this planet, but it's actually maintained on this planet. If I was thinking about going anywhere and I wanted to transport my oceans away from this planet and take them to somewhere else to create life, because I'd have to take the water if I wanted to go, I wouldn't be thinking about going to Mars. the water would just sit on Mars. Okay, it's got 95% carbon dioxide, but that's because there's virtually nothing to absorb it. There's very little moisture or anything else like that. There's very little to absorb that carbon dioxide cycle. But if there was water there and life could exist, it would suck it up, and then it could digest the rock because of the carbon dioxide. I wouldn't be thinking about Mars has got no volcanoes. It could never have life again, not until you could start making volcanoes occur. You'd want to find a planet with loads of volcanoes, and that's Earth when we're already here. Well, the next one in is Venus. Venus has got all these volcanoes. You add oceans to Venus. Oh my God. You'd have an atmosphere in absolutely no time at all. That steam would go up. It would block out that close proximity to the sun. Suddenly, everything would just fire up. That planet would be busy in a matter of days. Just add water. It's got volcanoes. That's all you need. Water and volcanoes and sunlight, and you've got the basis ingredient for everything that can go on. And obviously carbon dioxide in the equation coming from the volcanoes. Anyway, so that was that shot. Moving forward, we had those 3 shots I think I showed you at the very beginning. Crazy floods. We had on February the 8th, we had massive glacier. Now this is no doubt an earthquake, because it could have just been caused by snow and a massive glacier, but I'm much more likely that it was an earthquake that caused this. But who knows? Maybe it was just rapid melt, a massive build-up of snow. But loads and loads of dams are destroyed, just as we're really concerned might happen on the Yangtze River when it shakes. So we're seeing the type of thing that we were seeing in 1930, and every time Jupiter passed, massive dams collapsing and all this sort of stuff. You know, we're seeing the same thing happen on the February 8th in India. So what else have we happened? Crazy sightings, lots of interesting sightings. That to me, possibly one of the twins, possibly Hydra, possibly just a standard lenticular cloud, and also very possibly kind of like, you know, it's very interesting red dust coming out of Etna at the moment. Etna's absolutely spewing, you know, it's just raining debris coming down at the moment. Lots of crazy volcanoes going off. We're in a key point of the cycle. Again, that's, I think, is Hydra still. That on my mind is one of the twins. That's just an epic shot, just put up by Ari 55. Look at that. Look at that. Just spectacular. And we're just too cool to look at this. Too cool to look at nuclear power stations going bang when this thing flies by. Literally, that thing. That is a nuclear power station destroyer. That's what it does. Every time it's come by, it has so far destroyed 1% of all our nuclear power stations that were running. Amazing shot. 26th of February, so we're getting closer to the activity. We know that it's up there. We know we're close to it. This is the same thing. And we get this massive shot. This is either Hydra or it's one of the twins coming in. Quite honestly, I still think it's probably Hydra, but it could literally be the twin over the top of us coming in. One of the twins coming over the top of us. You know, obviously I'm not sure. Maybe it's a bit of Photoshop inside there. I truly don't know. But generally speaking, Brandon Corey Nagley doesn't do that. But obviously, you know, it's just such a fantastic shot that I'm just a bit like, but, well, I say generally, Brandon doesn't do that. I've never known him to do that, should I say. That's a horrible thing to say generally, because generally it means he sometimes does, and I've never seen him do that. Sorry, Brandon. You know. I just put that up there because that was just posted a couple of days ago, and they were just saying that in Iceland they were just getting kind of like, they were getting an unprecedented situation. Everything was shaking, and they were thinking something was going to come in. I just thought new study claims mysterious planet 9 does exist, and they show you the orbit of planet 9, and look what they're doing here. They've got all of the different angles of all these different planets coming in at different. This is the front end. Sorry, but I've put my cursor over. This is the front end over here. So anything that's coming round, we have to assume that they're saying this is the sun, this is our little solar system, and all the rest of it, and all these big dwarf planets come in. But you can imagine they don't come in at this angle because the sun's going to be moving. So these are going to be trailing behind. So they're all going to pretty much come in at the same sort of way, because this thing's going to be moving whichever way it's going to be going. Something's not going to be coming from the front end going around. That's like putting, it's just putting it all back to front. So this is the classic Zachariah Sitchin, blah, 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 Mike kind of like Brown, kind of the Aries, kind of like, this is the story that kind of Robert Harrington kind of like bullshitted Zachariah Sitchin with. This is the old 3,600 year classic model that you've been led to believe. And of course, 3,600 years, imagine something coming in after spending 1,800 years heading towards the sun. 1,800 years, finally gets to the sun. How long is it going to be at the sun before it kind of swings around the sun and disappears out? How could you have a Planet X crossing that lasts clearly since started in the times of the Carrington event in 1859, where red dust and crazy stuff, people were killed by crazy machines that just all went into meltdown all across the planet from pole to pole. People wrote books about it all around the world. It was a massive event that affected the globe. Electricity, everything, things just melted, burnt up. That's literally what we could see in April. And of course then in May, that's when they're going to fire up their Large Hadron Collider. They've put it all back till May, and you wonder why they've put it back till May. And the reason they've put it back till May is because they know something's coming in April. But they're going to get their Large Hadron Collider going up. So that was on March the 2nd. Big volcano starting to go off, and so we know we've been building up for something. Devastating floods in Morocco. We guarantee that's been caused by Etna, because of all the particles coming up from that storm, and it's coming down from the jet streams across Europe and straight into Africa, and just taking all the moisture with it and just dumping it in Africa. And there's so much other stuff that I want to take you through. We've explored it down the years for so long that there's just so much data now. We can just look at so much about this. We can just see so much, and it's all there if we want to see. So that is the new updated Dobbs model. I haven't said nearly as much of the stuff I wanted to say, and it's a bit all over the place. And I don't think I'm going to get it much better than that. But that's kind of 1,800 years, and if you do 2 times that, you come 3,600 years. And in 3,600 years, you can literally see that. That we have about 6, 12, 13, maybe 13 cycles of. No, I suppose it would be 12. It would be 12 actually. It would be 12 cycles of our sun around planet X. Just 12 cycles of our sun around planet X. It's 3,600 years, almost exactly. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for your effort. So apologies, it's another video so late and so long. It's just such a big thing. It's getting very difficult to bring all this data together now because it's such a big picture. Really, it needs just to go into a much higher level film now, and maybe that will come. You know, you've got big stuff coming up this year, though. Big stuff. And you saw also 1666 was on the big timeline. You know, that's the, like I say, the Wat Tyler Zodiac, or the Peasants' Revolt Zodiac. Kind of a cool name for it, really, because it kind of captures the essence of the parts of our zodiac that we've removed. And we can start seeing the big influences now. And you can start calculating those in your own life now, and we start building a bigger zodiac. Honey in the heart, 1,000 thank yous, all the love in the world. Take care. Until next time. Ciao.
Sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish things simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.